You're tuned to More Living with Jim Brogan, broadcasted live from the Brogan Financial Studios at News Talk 98.7, where old-fashioned values, expert knowledge, and genuine understanding come together to give you the retirement straight talk you deserve. Jim's a former National Advisor of the Year recipient and a financial educator, and he's here today to talk about how you can live out the best years of your life. Jim and the Brogan Financial team have been helping retirees and pre-retirees across the Southeast for almost 20 years in their pursuit of financial independence. You can reach them during the week at 865-862-6800. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn, folks, because More Living with Jim Brogan starts now.
Happy Saturday, East Tennessee. Welcome to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. You know, today is September 11th, 2021. And, of course, it's been 20 years now since the terrorist attacks that claimed the lives of 2,977 people. That fateful Tuesday morning, the world watched in disbelief as 4 hijacked airplanes crashed into the World Trade Center towers, a field in Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon. The days that followed were spent glued to news coverage of the rescue, the recovery activities, listening to the agonizing stories of those who were searching for missed loved ones, cheering the efforts of thousands of heroes that emerged, and some of the horrific images that we saw. The tragedies that unfolded that morning have really impacted generations. You know I remember, and I'm sure you do too, it's kind of one of those days we remember exactly where we are and what was going on when all this happened. And I'm honored to have 2 guests joining us this morning to talk about their own personal connection and experiences on September 11th, 2001. Our first guest is a coworker and a friend of mine. Peter Sagansky is a financial advisor at Brogan Financial. He's been with us for over 8 years. And prior to moving to Knoxville, Pete worked for Deutsche Asset Management on Wall Street in New York City. And he commuted daily from his home in New Jersey to Manhattan. And he was working in his office in Lower Manhattan on the morning of September 11th, 2001. Good morning, Peter. Welcome to More Living. It's great to have you with us.
Good morning, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Pete, as I mentioned, in 2001, you were working in Lower Manhattan. What was your job, and where were you in relation to the World Trade Center Twin Towers?
Yeah, well, I was working for Deutsche Bank at the time, and I was a senior trader on their equity trading desk. Our building was located at 130 Liberty Street. The building was attached to the World Trade Center South Tower by a covered enclosed walking bridge, but we were immediately adjacent to the South Tower.
Oh, wow. So what did you, I mean, I'm sure, and we'll get into kind of what happened when the first tower or the first plane hit, but what was it like that morning? I mean, do you remember much about leading up to that? I mean, it was a beautiful day in New York. What do you remember about the morning going in that day?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was really just a typical day for me. I left my house in Chatham, New Jersey, probably around 4:30 as I normally would. I drove to Jersey City. I would usually work out, and then I would take the PATH train, which is a train that provided service from New Jersey into Lower Manhattan. Goes under the Hudson River there. I took that to the South Tower. The stop is directly underneath the South Tower. I walked out of the building, went across to where our building was located, directly across the street. Probably got to my desk around 7:30, which is what I would normally do on a normal day. So it really was a very typical day for me so far.
7:30, Pete. I don't see you in our office at 7:30 in the morning.
Little bit of a different lifestyle.
I know. I'm just kidding around. You were getting up at 4:30 though. Holy cow! Just to and of course you're so religious about working out in the morning. I know you've done that for a long, long time. But so then where were you when the first plane hit the North Tower, what was the atmosphere like in the office? And like, I know it took a while for people to realize really what was going on until the second plane hit. So can you just kind of walk us through what was going on in your office and how were people reacting, or was it kind of like, oh, what in the world's going on?
Yeah, it was a very confusing time. I remember I was sitting at my desk. My office windows overlooked, so I was on a trading floor, but the windows overlooked, the Hudson River, and I was sitting there doing what I normally do, which is getting research from the street in the morning, collecting research before the markets open, getting ready to, with getting my trades in order, and I heard what I thought was thunder, to be honest with you. And I looked out over the just beautiful sky, out over the river, and I just thought to myself, that's very strange that I'm hearing thunder. Shortly after that, our security team came on the loudspeaker and basically told us that they felt that there was either a small explosion either in the building adjacent to us, and they didn't specify the World Trade Center, or down in the street, to just stay exactly where we were, that we were safer inside the building, et cetera, et cetera. And, for us, because we really didn't hear much of an impact or noise, that kind of made sense. So kind of went about our business. Ironically, I was on the phone taking research from a business colleague of mine who worked at Cantor Fitzgerald, who was not in the office that day. He and his wife were traveling, and he was calling me from the San Francisco office. I had just hung up the phone with him, and of course we have CNBC and different news stations on our trading desks, and I could see the second plane hitting the South Tower before I actually felt the impact. And once that plane hit the side of the building, hit the South Tower, it was, crystal clear what was going on. People began to panic at that point, and, security came back on the line and said, listen, you guys need to just stay where you are. You're safer in the building. But myself and my team decided we were leaving. So we started making our way down the staircase and out to the street. And, of course, when we got down to the street, it was, the only way that I could explain what it looked like down there was a war zone. I mean, and it didn't look like it had just happened. There was just debris everywhere. The ash looked like it had been impregnated into the sidewalks. It looked like it had been there a very long time. We kind of looked. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, Peter, how tall was the building that you worked in?
Our floors, we had 65 floors, I believe, in the Deutsche building. I was on the 35th floor.
Wow.
And as we were going down, as we were trying to exit the building, they were telling us to go back up to our floors. And we got off for a second at one floor and called the security department. And they're like, go back to your floor, go back to your desks. And I said, you're aware that the windows are blown out on the north side of that floor? And they said, no, we're not. Just stay where you are. And I was like, listen, I'm not going to be listening to these people at this point. We're going to have to just make our own decision. And we decided to leave. And go ahead.
So then you were out on the street before the first tower came down?
Yeah, when we got out to the street, I remember looking up at the tower and seeing that there was significant damage to the tower. You could see where the plane had impacted. And my immediate thought was, that's a lot of damage. It's going to be very difficult to repair. I don't know. I saw the firemen and the first responders rushing into the buildings. And I just thought that it was going to be of course, obviously concern for the people who were inside, but thinking that this was repairable and that there was no chance that those buildings would come down. But in the same breath, I was thinking that I needed to get out of there before they shut down Lower Manhattan.
Okay, I tell you what, I want to then talk about kind of how the rest of the day unfolded, Pete. But we need to get to our first break. So when we come back, as we visit with Peter Sagansky, he's a coworker and a friend of mine at Brogan Financial, a financial advisor who was in Lower Manhattan on that fateful day 20 years ago. We will talk about how the rest of that day unfolded. So stay with us. You're listening to More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Thanks for tuning in to More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm your host, Jim Brogan, and it's the 20-year anniversary of 9/11, and we are visiting with Pete Sagansky. Pete works in my office. He's a coworker and a friend. He's one of our financial advisors. He was in Lower Manhattan working with Deutsche Bank, Deutsche Asset Management on that fateful day, and we're talking about his experience. And Pete, I know it's not real easy to talk about that, so thank you so much for coming on today. So you were out on the street, and you mentioned it looked kind of like a war zone and that stuff had been there for a while, even though it had just happened. And then was it just like a mad dash to try to get out of there as quickly as you could before, as you said, worried that they would shut down Lower Manhattan?
No, it really wasn't. I mean, there was a lot of people, somebody like myself who would come out of an office building, you hear all these stories of the heroic people that rushed in to help. And at that point, when we had gotten down there, of course, the towers hadn't come down. So, there were a lot of emergency first responders rushing in, and it looked like that they had everything under control. There were a lot of people that were standing there just kind of looking and watching. So there wasn't, people were very concerned about what had happened, obviously, but there wasn't really any concern of safety issues. So, I was just thinking that I know how Manhattan works and that they would most likely shut down the any option for me to get out of the city. So I wanted to start that process sooner rather than later. And actually, I think by 9:20, Port Authority had already closed all the bridges and tunnels leaving New York City, so you couldn't come in or go out. So I started thinking about getting away from there. Everybody else, took their time because nobody was really felt that was a safety issue. And everybody just kind of started to make their way, towards their homes. I commuted uptown to meet with a friend of mine. I had called him from the office as I was leaving. We were going to try to get out of town, out of the city together. I met him up in Midtown. As I was taking the subway up from Wall Street, people, there were all kinds of people getting on the subway with all kinds of crazy stories. Most of them, were not reality. But nonetheless, people were in a panic trying to get out of the city. Got up to Midtown, and we saw on the TV in his office that the Circle Line was running, which is a tour boat, operation in New York City, that they were shuttling people back and forth. So we ran down to the West Side Highway and joined about 4,000 people that were waiting they were literally on the West Side Highway waiting to get onto these boats. We were able to get on one of the Circle Line boats that took us over to Jersey City. Now, the first tower had come down while I was while I was getting up to Midtown, while I was on the subway. And while we were in the middle of the Hudson River waiting to dock on the Jersey side, the North Tower had come down. So we saw that from the Hudson River. I made my way over to Jersey City. We walked for about an hour to my vehicle, which was parked down by the Holland Tunnel, and we made it home from there.
So could you see are you saying that when you were on the Hudson, you could see you saw the North Tower come down?
We couldn't see the tower itself because there was already so much smoke from the South Tower that was still lingering. So all we could see was that clearly something had happened. And of course, no cell phones were working. The only phones that were working at that point were people that had New York area code extensions on their phones. So there were some people that could kind of tell what was going on. And, this was a boat that was meant to hold about probably 1,800 people at max, and there was probably 4,000 people on this boat, so it was kind of a hectic situation sitting in the middle of the East River, of the Hudson River, waiting for, to dock, because, at that point we did feel at somewhat, as a threat of danger. There were not supposed to be any planes flying at that time, and the only thing that was flying up and down the river were F-16s, fortunately. But yeah, we were able to see just a cloud of smoke. It wasn't, we could not see the building itself.
Wow. So you had made the decision, Pete, to take your team out of your building, even though security was saying, "Hey, everybody, just sit tight." But when you saw the second plane go in, y'all were like, "No, my team's leaving." What about the other people in your office that did stay? Were they able to get out okay for the most part?
Yeah, for the most part, everybody got out okay. I mean, fortunately, Deutsche Bank only had one fatality directly from 9/11, and that was somebody who was working in the World Trade Center for us. Unfortunately, that's where we had our backup servers, and they were working in that area. So everyone else did make it out.
Well, thank God for that. I guess it was common in your town for a lot of people commuted into the city from your town in New Jersey. So were there neighbors and friends that did not make it home that day?
Yeah, there were, from my hometown, which was Summit, New Jersey, there were 10 lives that were lost on 9/11. Chatham, New Jersey, which was where I was living at the time, we lost 13 residents, one being my neighbor who lived 2 houses down. He worked for Cantor Fitzgerald as a bond trader. 2 young children, had a newborn son that was born 3 days earlier. It was a very trying time for everyone.
I can imagine. Pete, one of the compelling things from that day was how people came together to support one another. And really, even across the entire country, the amount of unity that emerged in the midst of that unthinkable tragedy. There was a tremendous outpouring of support from first responders, from the community, from the entire country, and really from the world. From your perspective of having been there, what do you see as how the world rallied and how the country unified and how we kind of rallied out of that? And what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, Jim, it was really amazing to see. It showed what we're capable as a country. The first responders, the crews, the companies, the equipment, everyone that came together to help, the people that came from out of state, everyone wanted to help in any way that they could during that time. And, we watched that continue for years following the tragedy. I mean, you guys have seen it. You'll see it. You would have seen it from down here, but being there, that was on every news station, just the work and the amount of commitment from these people that came together. It was just really, truly amazing. I mean, if you look at our country today, we could certainly use more of that today.
Yeah, we had such unity then coming out of that, and we look at where we are today. Do you think that as a country we've, kind of, I don't want to say forgotten, but as a society, we don't have that unity?
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's a long way to go. The most important lesson coming from that is, people look at it, you never know what tomorrow brings, and you've got to make the most out of today. And, you hear people say that all the time, but, an event like that really brings that to fruition.
Absolutely. Pete, in the aftermath of the terrorist attack, the financial world had to get back to business and get up and running. And I know that was one of the resolves of our spirit, of our country was, we're going to get back. We're going to get things back again in the financial world, even though it was an attack on Wall Street. What was the disaster recovery like for your company and with getting back to work and getting things up and running?
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, it was a monumental task. We had a disaster recovery in Parsippany, New Jersey. As I mentioned earlier, we had some servers, our backup servers that were in the World Trade Center that were obviously destroyed. It was, basically an abandoned office building in South Jersey when we first got there. I was part of the critical reconstruction team, so I was there almost immediately. Basically we had to start from scratch. Our IT guys worked on getting the technology and systems rebuilt. Well, me and my team focused on communications, rebuilding, our connections and the trading functionality with the major firms that we traded with on Wall Street. But I will say what happened over the next few days, that building was an empty shell when I got there. And within 2 days, we had 18-wheelers from Dell, fully supplied 18-wheelers stocked with computers. We had kitchen supply companies shipping in they had that whole building outfitted and running in a very, very short period of time. It was really nothing short of a miracle. And our technology team, they work day in and day out. My team as well worked day in and day out, and we were ready when the New York Stock Exchange reopened for trading on September the 17th.
That's amazing. Pete, at what point did you get back down to the World Trade Center site?
It's funny, not funny, but I had this conversation with somebody yesterday. I never went back. I went down there one time as part of a recovery team where we sent up 2 people in to get some critical information from our building. Of course, there was toxic air at the time, and they were wearing breathers, like the firemen wear. But that was the only time I had gone down there. I think, I had no reason to really be down there, and I really had no want to be down there. I think I've been down there once since to Lower Manhattan. Our building, I was then working out of our Midtown office up on Park Avenue after that. So I did not go back down except on 2 separate occasions.
Well, Pete, I know it's not easy to talk about this even 20 years later. I appreciate you so much coming on and sharing a little bit about, taking us back 20 years and helping us. We don't want to ever forget that. And if we could get that unity back in this country, it would certainly be a great thing. But thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me, Jim. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's Pete Sagansky. He's a coworker and a friend of mine, works with us at Brogan Financial. He's a financial advisor, was down in Lower Manhattan, as you've heard, when the Twin Towers on that fateful day 20 years ago. When we come back, I have a dear friend of mine, Patrick Lenore, who I went to college with. He played football for the University of Tennessee. He also has a very strong personal connection to 911. And so we're going to visit with him in the next segment. So stay tuned as we're commemorating and remembering what happened 20 years ago today. So stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan right here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. Today is 9/11/2021. It's been 20 years since that fateful day. And we're commemorating that. We don't want to ever forget. And, we unified did such a great job unifying as a country. Pete, we certainly appreciate Pete Sagansky coming on and talking about his personal experience being there on that day. I'm now joined by a very, very dear personal friend of mine, Patrick Lenore. Is a good friend of mine from college. Patrick played football at the University of Tennessee. And actually, most famously, was on the cover of Sports Illustrated coming out of the Miracle at South Bend in 1991. And as I remember it, Patrick, if I remember correctly, Tony Thompson had caught and had a screen pass that he took in for the go-ahead touchdown late in the fourth quarter, and he jumped up into your arms, and that was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Am I remembering all that correctly?
No, you're getting old, Jim. That was Aaron Hayden.
Aaron Hayden, that's right.
Yeah, number 24.
It wasn't Tony Thompson. It was Aaron Hayden.
That's right. That's right.
That's
you
funny.
got a good memory.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, you don't have a good memory. I mean, but no, that was a wonderful game.
But it was a screenplay, right? It was a screenplay. It went about 35 or 40 yards, if I remember.
Yes, it sure was.
See, I got a pretty good memory when it comes to football, Tennessee football. Well, Patrick, your dad, you have quite a football lineage. Your dad, John Lenore, played at the University of Memphis. He was also a champion handball player. And then your brother, Rob. Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
No. I'm sure, a lot of people in Knoxville knew him because he obviously was a financial planner here. We're originally from Memphis, Germantown area. But, probably the best thing that ever happened to my dad was he's been playing handball for over 50 years. And, of course, you were so kind to sing at my father's funeral about a year ago. But anyway, he won a world championship in the 60-plus Bs over in Ireland, and I was with him. But he kind of dedicated this to my brother. We kind of dedicated this because it was about a year and a half after Rob had died and 9/11, all this kind of stuff. So he had always wanted to play in the world championship. He asked me about if I would go over there with him, and we kind of turned the trip into let's win this for Rob kind of thing. And I've never seen my dad play so well and so motivated to win it.
Wow.
And he'd lost weight, and it was just kind of, you could almost make a movie out of it. It was truly unbelievable. He was undefeated, but the best handball I've ever seen him play. But we dedicated the match to Rob, obviously my brother who was lost in the Trade Center. But it was a wonderful memory. It was awesome. So.
Oh wow, I'd not heard that part of it, Patrick. That is awesome. Of course, we all called your dad Crusher, and he got that nickname on the handball court, right?
He sure did. But then later, after Crusher, he started calling himself the world champ. Well, then kind of that stuck more. So he actually went by the last probably 10, 15 years of his life. He went by the world champ more.
That's great.
As his nickname. So he was quite a character.
So your brother Rob also played football. He played at Duke University. And,
he sure did, yes.
Of course, he was in the World Trade Center in the I guess the North Tower.
No, he was actually in the South Tower.
That's right. He was on the South Tower on that day. So let's just talk. And Patrick, I know this isn't easy. I thank you so much for coming on and talking about it. But he was in the South Tower. How long had he been working in New York, and what was his job?
Well, he married his college sweetheart from Long Island, and he'd always he was a econ and poli-sci major, but was kind of a math whiz. So he knew he wanted to do something in the financial arena, and they had gotten married. He'd moved up to New York. They got married, but he was on Wall Street there for a little while. He'd bounced around, but then he finally got over to I guess the World Trade Center, and I think he'd been there about 8 or 9 years, I believe, and he was up on the 107th floor. 102nd floor, and he worked for a company called Sandler O'Neill, investment type firm. So, but yeah, that's how long he'd been there roughly. So
he was on the 102nd floor of the South Tower, and when the first plane hit the North Tower, as I remember it, didn't he talk with your dad on the phone? Did he call your dad, or did your dad call him? What went on there, and what was their knowledge of the situation?
Yeah, my dad had like a little small TV or something in his office here in Knoxville, and of course I live in Chattanooga, but I was on my way to work, and my dad had called me, and something came on the radio about it, and anyway, it didn't really register right at first for some reason, but then my dad called me within probably a minute or two of that announcement on the radio, and said, "Hey, have you heard what's going on?" and all this kind of stuff. And so anyway, and then I was talking for a while, and my dad just talked to Rob, and he was just about to get out of the building. They were trying to decide if they should get out or not, because it was the building next to them that had been hit, and there was so much confusion. They couldn't see the plane. It was just they saw smoke and this kind of stuff. So anyway, my dad told him to go ahead and get out of there, and my brother was on the phone or something, but he was just about to leave, and but then actually when I was talking to my dad, his building got hit. He saw the building get hit while I was actually talking with my dad on the phone.
Your dad.
And so
what you're saying is when you were talking to your dad,
the South Tower.
Your dad saw the South Tower get hit.
Correct, right. And then, of course, it got obviously really serious then. And, it got pretty tough after that.
So I guess, so then on September, the next day, you and your dad decided to drive to New York to help look for Rob?
Yeah, so I actually I drove up from Chattanooga from East Brainerd up to my parents' house there in West Knoxville, and of course my parents were Iraq and my sister, and so we decided that we wanted to get on up there because there was some confusion there. We thought maybe it might be what kind of thing that all these hospitals might be full of people, from the collapse and things like that, and not knowing where they are, all these kind of things. So we thought we'd go up and be with my sister-in-law and niece and nephew who were out, they lived in Long Island where he lived. But we thought we would. So we drove up there the next day. My sister actually came down to Chattanooga. She was probably in high school at the time and came with my wife and kids and stuff. And yeah, so we drove up there. Obviously, all the planes were grounded at the time, and it was obviously a really tough drive up there. Because everyone lost phone communication. Up there, so we didn't know if he'd gotten out, if he was wandering around the city or trying to get over to an area, just trying to get back home, but he wasn't able to call his wife because all the cell phones were jammed or had been messed up. So it was a real tough 24-hour, 48-hour period there. But obviously we knew it didn't look very good, but we thought we kind of held on for a chance or an opportunity that he could still be alive. So that's when we decided to go up there.
So did you all end up? So you went to Long Island to see his family, Rob's family. Did you and Crusher end up going into Manhattan, or was that even an option?
Yeah, we actually did. We took the train in with a family friend of theirs, and his wife had made the little flyers that you probably have seen before with this mugshot, and then have you seen this person, and description of them and the age and all that kind of stuff. So we put out some of those around the city, and of course people had done that. Pretty much everyone had done that, so there were these flyers like that everywhere. But you could once you kind of saw some of the grounds, and then of course you were starting to hear that these hospitals, hey, no one was coming in. No one actually, pretty much, they were expecting a lot of people, as you remember, but nobody actually did show up. So we started kind of getting the feeling that, I think that it's not looking very good. And so, but my mom, it was just my dad and I and this friend that went in. I guess my mom didn't. And my sister-in-law, they stayed out in Long Island at their house. I guess they didn't. Well, they needed to be with Andrew and Courtney, my niece and nephew, who were just ironically their ages were 9 and 11 at the time. Courtney was 9 and Andrew was 11.
So your mom drove up. So she went up there with y'all in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, she sure did.
And then she stayed with the niece and nephew and daughter-in-law. So you actually, was it that next day or maybe the 13th, you actually were at the World Trade Center site? Or how close did you get to the actual?
Not real close. We didn't get real close. It was all blocked off and all, but I'd say within maybe 5 or 6 blocks probably. But, you kind of had that feeling. Well, the other thing is Sandler O'Neill, the company he worked for, they had kind of like they had sort of like a central location. They had met. They spread the word for everyone to meet at this one hotel in the city, and they kind of had like grief counselors and different counselors and different things like that, and people there to kind of like give emotional support and counseling support and like things to do, what to do, things to expect and stuff like that, and so. there was kind of that feeling when no one, when he hadn't called home in 48 hours or longer, that kind of thing. And, we pretty much had a good feeling that it was not looking good, that he was probably had perished. And so we, pretty much I think everybody had kind of had that feeling too, obviously just with the devastation of the collapse and all that. So.
Yeah, that's pretty tough. I mean, also not, having to take time to really know for sure. How long did you all stay up there, Patrick?
Well, we ended up actually staying really till his funeral, because obviously the planes. It was a while before the planes even got going again, and I can't even remember what day his funeral was on, but let me see. It was probably I'm going to say on the 25th or maybe something like that. But so my wife and kids and my dad on his side has a lot of family, aunts and uncles and sisters and brothers. So I had a lot of my aunts and uncles and cousins come up from all over Tennessee and Alabama and Georgia and stuff. And then his wife's family was very, very small, and they were just, very, very small. And then, so they all came up. So I was literally there the entire time. I'm glad I obviously had packed a bunch of clothes, but my wife brought this, a suit for me and things like that. But we stayed at my sister-in-law's house the entire time. And I was really able to bond a lot with Andrew and Courtney, obviously, because they were still pretty young at the time. And plus being far away, I had not got to, don't get to see them as much as I would have liked to, but it was a good time to try to be with them and support them, and because they probably didn't fully understand exactly what was happening.
Yeah. Well, and I know back at the time, I don't remember details, and I know you're not going to because you were so focused on that, but I know we'd had a little bit of communication from time to time while all that was going on, but I just didn't remember how long you had been up there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know it's hard to talk about, Patrick, but I really appreciate you coming on today. Our first guest works with me at Brogan Financial, and he was in Lower Manhattan in one of the buildings attached to the Trade Center when the towers got hit, and so we were visiting with him the first half of the show. So we just wanted to remember what happened 20 years ago, and remember those that. Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just thinking of one thing. I know what I probably didn't give very good information. I apologize. But it was really ironic and neat that my brother Rob, the very first game I went to in Neyland Stadium was the World's Fair was 83, right? 1983, isn't that right? World's Fair.
World's Fair was 1982, I think.
82. Okay, so Duke actually played Tennessee in 1982 here at the World's Fair.
Was that when Spurrier, when they beat us?
Mm-hmm. Well, he was the offensive coordinator, as Red Wilson was the head coach. But my brother was obviously on that team. But that was my very first game in Neyland, and I was, had the Duke. I was probably 7th or 8th grade, but I had the Duke jersey or the shirt on and all that night. But that was just a real memorable game for our family and all. And plus, we've got some family up here in Knoxville. But that's when we actually lived in Columbia, South Carolina at the time, where my brother went to high school, and then he went on to Duke. And we moved back to Memphis, where my parents were from. So I kind of became obviously a Tennessee fan after that. But I thought that was really just kind of neat and special that my very first game was at Neyland with against Duke. I hated that Duke obviously Tennessee lost, but it was a great memory.
Yeah, but that's a great memory. That's a great memory. And then, of course, you led the team through the T at one of the 9/11 anniversary dates. What was that? Was it at 10 years that you?
10 year, yes, sir.
You carried the American flag and led the team through the T?
Right.
That's a great
sure did.
memory,
that
too,
was that was amazing. I tell you, that was just so nice and just so, the university's been so good to me and my family. And, in fact, they called a few days ago and asked if I could be on the as a guest on the Bob Kessler or the pregame show. And I don't think I even told you that, but that was just a couple days ago. But I'm not real good in front of people, and I don't give a great interview, but I get a little nervous. But so I was like, I had to kindly decline that offer. But since you're obviously one of my best friends, I definitely wanted to do this. But anyway,
Well,
but they wanted me to come up to the game, and they've got some tickets for us. I'm actually here on campus right now, and I don't know if you're here. I'd love to meet up with you, but see you
I'll text
somewhere.
you here in a bit. We're going to be up there in the terrace. I'll text you here in a bit when we get ready to leave. I'd love to see you.
Yes, sir.
Well, Patrick, thanks
Jim,
for coming on.
Thank you so much. You've been so kind. I really appreciate you and your family, man.
Thank you, Patrick.
Everyone
Love
else.
you, man. And tell
Okay,
Christy and the kids we're hello. That's Patrick Lenore, whose brother Rob was in the South Tower on the 102nd floor when the World Trade on 9/11. So we visited with him. We also visited with Pete Sagansky and his experience being in Lower Manhattan on 9/11, as we kind of commemorate 20 years and remember those who fell and how we rallied as a country. When we come back, we'll have just a quick dollars and cents segment. I want to talk about the power of giving. So stay tuned. This is More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Thanks for tuning in. This is More Living on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. We come to you every Saturday at 9 a.m. and again at 3 p.m. If you missed part of today's show, please tune back in at 3, or you can catch our podcast online next week, as we've been visiting with two friends of mine that were deeply impacted by 9/11. One that was there and one who lost a brother. So we're going to talk, for dollars and cents, I want to talk about the power of giving. And I don't have a lot of time here, but giving, and I think it's so appropriate with what's going on right now. We had Rubicon, a tremendous charity, on a few weeks ago that does disaster relief with veterans. And I just think when we incorporate giving into our financial plan, it is so powerful what we receive back emotionally, spiritually, in quality of life. We struggle in today's society with the balance between that money-life balance. Money's a tool, it's not the objective. And it's an important tool, but ultimately, to have money-life balance, I think giving, no matter what you can do, at some level, can really make an impact on lives around you of people who aren't as fortunate as you are, and then also impact your own life. So if you're not already, please incorporate financial giving and giving of your personal time into your planning. Thank you for tuning in this week as we remember 20 years ago. Thank you to Chris. Thank you to Jill producing the show. This is More Living with Jim Brogan right here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
The views expressed by Jim Brogan and his guests are not that of Cumulus Media. Any discussion of financial, legal, and tax planning strategies is not intended to be individualized advice and is general in nature. Always consult with your advisor for advice specific to your needs. This program's content does not represent a recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or investment by Jim Brogan or Brogan Financial Incorporated.